My name is Peter, and for most of my life, I've worked tirelessly to build a stable foundation for my family. I thought I had cracked the code of life. Work hard, love fiercely, and everything else would fall into place. But life, as I've come to learn, has a knack for pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. For the past 15 years, I've been married to Mara, my rock and confidant. Together, we've raised 3 wonderful children, each a unique mix of chaos and joy. I took immense pride in providing for them, ensuring they had a big house, the best schools, and a life filled with opportunities. I stayed loyal through thick and thin, even though my job in the oil industry often kept me away for months at a time. Shortly after Mara and I tied the knot, I was promoted to a role that required me to spend 6 months away in remote, grueling locations. I returned home for just a month before heading back into the field. It wasn't ideal, but the pay was worth the sacrifices. Despite the distance, I stayed connected. Regular video calls, shared laughs, and glimpses of the life I was missing at home. Mara never gave me a reason to doubt her. Her smile was genuine, her voice steady, and the kids always seemed happy. I thought we were unshakable. Then came the day everything changed. I was offered a new position that allowed me to work remotely. No more months away, no more endless travel. I was finally coming home for good. I decided to keep it a secret, planning a surprise for Mara and the kids. I imagined their faces lighting up when they saw me walk through the door. But reality didn't align with my dreams. I arrived home on a quiet Sunday afternoon. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed an unusual stillness, no laughter, no signs of life. Sundays were always family days, filled with noise and activity. I stepped inside, calling out, "Mara? Kids!" Silence greeted me. The house was empty. Confused, I sat down and called Mara. She picked up quickly, her voice tinged with surprise. "Peter, is everything okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Where are you?" There was a pause, a long, unsettling silence that made my stomach churn. "I'm home," she finally said. "That's strange," I replied, "because I'm home too, and I don't see you anywhere." Her tone shifted. "Oh, we just stepped out to the store. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Something about her voice didn't sit right with me, but I brushed it off. When Mara and the kids returned, the sight of them erased my unease. The kids ran to me, shouting "Daddy," and throwing their arms around me. Mara followed, her smile wide yet slightly forced. I ignored the nagging feeling in my gut. I was home, and that's all that mattered. That evening, we sat down to a hearty dinner Mara had prepared. The kids shared stories about school, their voices filled with excitement. I told them about my work, carefully leaving out the grueling parts. Mara mentioned she'd been attending fitness classes regularly. "It helps me stay in shape," she said with a bright smile. "Good for you," I replied, grateful she'd found time for herself despite the challenges of running a household. For the first time in years, I felt the warmth of domestic bliss. But cracks began to form. Mara's affectionate demeanor slowly faded. At first, I chalked it up to adjustment. We weren't used to spending so much time together after years of long absences. Then, trouble struck at work. My company was on the brink of bankruptcy, throwing me into a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless meetings, and financial uncertainty. With my income suspended, we relied on our savings to get by. One day, Mara approached me with a solution. "I think I should get a job," she said. "It'll help ease the pressure." It was a thoughtful suggestion, and I appreciate her initiative. "That's a great idea," I said. "Just make sure it's something manageable. I don't want you overworking yourself." But as Mara started her new job, the distance between us widened. Our conversations became curt, and our time together dwindled. She began coming home late, claiming her fitness classes had moved to the evenings. At first, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. A slow unraveling. I never questioned Mara's sudden change in schedule. People adjust their routines all the time, right? But something about how she explained it didn't sit right with me. It wasn't her words, but the hesitance behind them, the forced casualness that felt slightly off. One evening, I asked her where she was working out. The question was meant to be conversational, but her reaction wasn't. She froze for just a beat, her face unreadable, before naming a gym. Her answer sounded rehearsed, not lived. That's when I began to notice the other details. Her phone, always within reach, seemed to buzz endlessly. Every time it did, she'd glance at the screen and then flip it face down on the table. When I casually asked who she was texting, she'd shrug it off with a practice, just work stuff. One night, as her phone vibrated yet again, I decided to push a little further. "Let me see your phone," I said, forcing my tone to remain light and playful. Her reaction was immediate and sharp. She clutched her phone to her chest, her eyes blazing. "That's my personal space, Peter. You have no right to invade it." Her defensiveness stung more than her words. It wasn't just the act of hiding something. It was a realization that she felt the need to hide anything at all. But I didn't argue. I knew that pressing without evidence would only deepen the distance between us. Instead, I decided to uncover the truth on my own. The investigation begins. For a few days, I followed her after work. Nothing too intrusive, just enough to see where she went. At the same time, I enlisted a trusted friend who worked with her. He agreed to discreetly keep an eye on her at the office and let me know if anything seemed unusual. At first, everything seemed normal. Her routine mirrored what she described. Work, gym, home. There were no mysterious detours, no clandestine meetings, no whispers exchanged in dimly lit corners. For a moment, I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was overreacting. But then, almost overnight, Mara changed. The coldness that had crept into our marriage melted away. She was suddenly attentive, affectionate. The wife I remember from years ago. The timing was too perfect. It felt like a calculated move, not a genuine shift. Someone had tipped her off. The only person who knew about my surveillance was my friend at her office. Whether intentional or accidental, he must have let something slip. Mara knew I was watching, and now she was covering her tracks. I told my friend to stand down. If she was aware of my suspicions, she'd only become more careful. It was time to wait and observe, a question that changed everything. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Mara blindsided me with a question that sent chills down my spine. "What do you think about open marriages?" she asked, her tone light, almost casual. I blinked, caught off guard. "What do I think?" I repeated, stalling. "I think they're absurd. If people can't commit to one person, they shouldn't get married in the first place." She nodded slowly, as if considering my answer. "I get that," she said. "But don't you think the world is changing? More people are exploring different types of relationships. It's becoming normal." "I don't care what's normal for other people," I replied, my voice firm. "That's not the kind of life I signed up for." Her face was unreadable, but the tension in the room was palpable. The question wasn't hypothetical. It was a harbinger. I'd read enough stories online to recognize the signs. When a spouse brings up open marriages out of the blue, it's almost always a prelude to admitting they've cheated, are cheating, or are planning to cheat. Everything clicked into place. Her guarded behavior, her glued-to-the-hip phone, the sudden coldness, followed by an equally sudden warmth. It was all part of a pattern. Seeking the truth. I couldn't let the doubts gnaw at me any longer. I reached out to my friend, explaining everything. Mara's behavior, her loaded question, my suspicions. He sighed heavily, shaking his head. "Peter, this is bigger than I can handle," he admitted. "If you want the truth, you need someone who knows how to dig deep. This might mean uncovering years of secrets." He handed me a business card. "This guy's the best," he said, "but he's not cheap. Cost didn't matter." I needed answers. I met with the investigator the next day, laying out everything, her sudden shifts, her cryptic behavior, and that ominous question. He listened intently, his sharp eyes scanning my face as I spoke. "I'll take the case," he said, "but this could take time. If there's a history of infidelity, it won't be easy to uncover." "That's fine," I said. "Do whatever it takes. I just need to know the darkest doubt." As the investigator began his work, a darker thought crept into my mind, one so unsettling that I tried to push it away. But it persisted, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. What if I wasn't the father of my children? The eldest looked enough like me to quiet my doubts, but the two younger ones, their features didn't match mine. I told myself it was paranoia, but the thought refused to leave. As the days stretched on, I felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss of betrayal. Whatever the investigator uncovered, one thing was certain: my life would never be the same again. It didn't matter that I wasn't their biological father. I had raised them, loved them, and been their dad in every way that counted. How could a DNA test possibly change that? And yet, the sleepless nights persisted, haunted by relentless what-ifs, each more agonizing than the last. My mind became a storm of doubts, questions, and fears until finally I broke. I needed to know the truth. One morning, while Marlo was at work and the kids were at school, I acted. With trembling hands, I collected samples, strands of hair, toothbrushes, anything that might provide the answers I desperately sought. I added my own sample to the mix and sent everything to a private lab. They promised results within a week, but each passing day felt like an eternity. Toward the end of that agonizing week, I received a call. The investigator's voice was calm, but there was a gravity to his tone that made my chest tighten. "I have enough information to shock you," he said. "We agreed to meet at a small cafe near my house." When I arrived, he was already there, a manila folder and laptop waiting on the table before him. His expression was serious, his nod brief but weighted with sympathy. "This is going to be hard to hear," he began. He opened the folder, pulled out a flash drive, and inserted it into the laptop. As the screen flickered to life, my world began to unravel. "Your wife has been living a double life," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm not just talking about a single affair. It goes much deeper than that." The first images on the screen showed Marlo with different men. Photos from restaurants, hotels, even gyms. At first, some looked innocent enough. But as he clicked through, the images grew damning, leaving no room for doubt. "It started with your first business trip," he explained, scrolling through files, "and it's been happening ever since. Over the course of your marriage, she's had relationships with more than 10 different men. Some casual, others ongoing and deeply intimate." The words hit like a sledgehammer. My jaw tightened, fists clenching beneath the table. "She didn't leave you," he continued, "because you made it easy for her. Your frequent absences for work, the steady flow of money, the comfortable lifestyle, all of it gave her the freedom to carry on without worrying about being caught. When you were home, she could play the role of the loving wife without much effort." His words began piecing together years of confusion. The coldness, the unexplained shifts in her behavior, the sudden hostility. It all made sense now. "But things change," he said, pulling up more files. "When your financial situation became unstable and you were home more often, her facade started to crack. She couldn't keep up the act. That's when the aggression started. She stopped seeing you as an asset and started seeing you as a burden." He slid the folder across the table. "It's all here, photos, videos, messages. Every lie, every betrayal, documented." My hand hovered over the folder, hesitant to look at the contents. But I knew there was no turning back. Then his tone shifted, heavier now, almost mournful. "There's something else," he said, his gaze locking onto mine. "Your second child isn't yours." The air left my lungs. I froze, unable to process the words. "I can't speak for the other two," he added, "but I recommend testing them as well. Your second child is the result of an affair she had during one of your business trips. She manipulated the timing, made you believe the child was yours. I'm sure you remember how insistent she was about having a second baby. I did. The memory hit like a freight train. Marlo had been unusually persuasive, painting the picture of a perfect family and the need to give our eldest a sibling. She'd framed it as a shared dream, but now I saw the truth. It had been a calculated lie. The revelations gutted me. I'd braced myself for bad news, but nothing could have prepared me for this. Two of the children I had loved, nurtured, and built my life around weren't mine. This wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation of everything I thought I had built. But if Marlo had spent years playing me for a fool, she was about to learn I wasn't one. That same day, I contacted the investigator and asked for a lawyer recommendation. Within hours, I was sitting in the office of a sharp, no-nonsense attorney named David. As I laid everything out, the folder, the evidence, the years of deceit, he listened intently, his eyes narrowing with determination. This won't be easy, he warned. Courts tend to side with mothers in custody cases, especially when children are involved. But with the evidence you provided, we have a strong case. Let's get to work. Papers were filed swiftly, and within days, Marlo was served. Her reaction was as predictable as it was pathetic. She stormed to my door, tears streaming, her voice trembling with fury and desperation. "What are you doing, Peter?" she demanded, her tone swinging between anger and pleading. "You can't leave me like this. What about the kids? They need you." I met her gaze, my voice cold and unwavering. My voice was steady, even as the words I spoke carried a finality that I knew would sting. "You don't need me. You've made that clear for years. As for the kids, we'll let the courts decide." Mara's face twisted in anger, but as expected, she had no response. She'd relied on silence and manipulation for too long, but this time, her silence betrayed her. The initial hearings were grueling. Even with the mountain of evidence I'd meticulously gathered, photos, videos, and correspondence that painted a clear picture of her deceit. Still, the court hesitated to rule in my favor. Mara clung tightly to her role as the primary caregiver, arguing that the children needed stability. She was convincing, I'll admit that. But I had one final card to play, and the moment to reveal it had come. At the next hearing, my lawyer presented the DNA test results. When the results were read aloud, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. My heart sank, even though I had braced myself for this revelation. I was the biological father of only the eldest child. The judge's gaze was piercing as she addressed me. "What are your intentions, Mr. Peter?" I stood, forcing my voice to remain calm and unwavering. "Your Honor, I am willing to take full custody of my biological child. I have loved and supported all three children, but I cannot, in good conscience, take custody of children who are not mine. I will, however, continue to provide financial support for the two younger ones until a more permanent arrangement is made." Mara's face contorted, a mixture of shock and fury. She hadn't anticipated this level of resolve from me. The court, clearly unsettled by the complexity of the situation, scheduled another hearing to determine the final custody arrangement. In the weeks that followed, Mara grew increasingly desperate. She was losing ground and sought every opportunity to delay the inevitable. That's when she turned to her sister, Lisa. Lisa and I had always shared an easy rapport. She was warm and empathetic, and everything Mara had ceased to be over the years. What Mara didn't realize was that Lisa and I had developed a quiet connection, a mutual respect and understanding that had slowly deepened over time. One evening, Lisa showed up at my house under the pretense of discussing the kids and the ongoing court case. Her usual confidence seemed replaced by nervousness, her voice hesitant yet sincere. "You didn't deserve any of this, Peter," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "You've always been a good man, a great father." Perhaps it was the weight of the betrayal, the years of loneliness, or simply the fact that Lisa saw me in a way Mara never had. Whatever the reason, one thing led to another, and by the end of the night, We found ourselves in each other's arms. Lisa was gone by morning, and I thought that was the end of it. But Mara, ever suspicious, showed up unannounced later that day. When she walked in and saw Lisa and me together, her reaction was explosive. "You too!" she screamed, her face a mask of rage. "How could you do this to me?" Lisa, to her credit, stood her ground. "You did this to yourself, Mara," she said firmly. "You've been lying and cheating for years. You don't get to play the victim now." Mara stormed out, slamming the door behind her. At the final court hearing, the judge ruled in my favor. I was awarded custody of my eldest child, while Mara retained custody of the two younger ones. She was granted a settlement equal to half the value of our house, but I opted to pay her in cash rather than sell the property. With the divorce finalized, I began rebuilding my life. My focus shifted entirely to raising my child, ensuring they had the love and stability they deserved. But I wasn't done seeking justice. Using the evidence I had gathered, I tracked down each of Mara's lovers, many of whom had their own families. To every wife and girlfriend, I sent a carefully compiled dossier exposing their partner's infidelity. I wasn't vindictive, just thorough. If they had helped dismantle my life, they deserved to face the consequences. As for the wealthy businessman Mara had been involved with, I sent him the DNA results proving he wasn't the father of her second child. His silence afterward was confirmation enough that his world had been upended too. With Mara out of my life and the truth laid bare, I finally felt a sense of freedom. Lisa and I stayed in touch, though we agreed to take things slow. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine again. That's how I found my way back to myself. What would you have done in my shoes? Was I too harsh or just harsh enough? Let me know your thoughts.